I'll be on the last boat to St Helena before the year is done. I'll be on the last boat to St Helena before the changes come. Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order, welcome to Panwo TV. What you just heard was me singing the chorus there to a song called Last Boat to St Helena by a band called Ever After, which it's a song which is kind of it's almost like a musical accompaniment to this series of films I made on St Helena Airport. It goes into most of the details that I go into, although not as deeply as I do, and from the perspective that I do, but it brings up this point, the prediction that I made when I began this series of films, and how sadly they seem to be coming true, which means that the island of St Helena is actually a case study for this, what happens when the Illuminati suddenly gets into somewhere it's not really been before. And this is a lovely area. This is not an island. I always come to islands normally to do my St Helena Airport videos. I haven't been able to this time because, well, funny enough, there are quite a few islands in Oxford, so there's no point, there's no sort of like shortage of them. Oxford is almost a network of islands on a river confluence. This is the River Isis, what is known elsewhere as the Thames. But you have I don't know, it's like, I thought, oh, well, there's so many nice quiet places around here, and so it's not quite an island. There are a couple of islands further on which I'm going to go to, but this is a lovely area. This, just give you a 360. There's some boat sheds there. That's from the old Salters steamers boatyard, and it's nice to have some privacy. You know, always nice to have a bit of privacy when I'm making these videos. More so now than ever before. I've become a little bit paranoid as late. I kind of think I'm going to, at some point, I'm going to bump into Sasha Johnson, who probably doesn't know who I am, but may well. Now, Sasha Johnson is she's actually a student here in Oxford, and she's also the leader of Black Lives Matter UK, well, the British Black Panthers. I think they have another name they give themselves. And of course, she probably wouldn't approve of me very much because of what I've said on the subject. So I always think I might bump into her somewhere. Sasha Johnson, I've seen her interviewed, and I must say, she is the second most obnoxious person in the world called Sasha. She really is. And also, you know, Oxford is also, like I say, it's very left-wing, it's very globalist. You know, they're still flying the bloody EU flag everywhere. I see it in people's windows, I see it, and you know, Remainers can get really nasty. I've talked about this before, and as a Leave voter in Oxford, it's a little bit sort of like, a bit dodgy. I mean, in fact, you can't see it from here, but there's a boat just up the river from where I'm standing, which is flying that flag, the gender study professor's apron, and this is despite the fact that we're nominally free of the Soviet states of the European Union, or the Kyrgyzstan, or whatever you want to call it. Yes, I'm a bit of an outsider, more so probably now than ever before in my own hometown. But St Helena is no longer an outsider to anything. If you want to know about the background of St Helena, just go to the link in the description box. I'm not going to repeat myself and repeat the points I made in previous videos, but I did make some prediction about the new airport that was built there, that it essentially is like dropping this pristine thing into the cesspit of modernity and post-modernity. It's something that's essentially pre-modern, not quite pre-Illuminati, but separate from a lot of the pathology of modernity and post-modernity, that is now suddenly, literally overnight, with the opening of the airport, the doors are flung open to everything that's good and bad about the outside world. What's a place, one of the most inaccessible places on earth, is literally, you couldn't get to it. It was a 6-day sea voyage from Cape Town, South Africa to get there. Now, it's now like an hour and a half from the same location. You take a walk up here. And that's, that of course has led to a lot of benefits, as I've explained previously, but it's also led to what might turn out to be a new dark age for that island. There's two separate topics I want to discuss in this video. It's kind of an update, and one is the internet. Now, the internet service provided on there. Now, what happened was that the St Helena was basically off the internet completely until about a decade ago. In fact, they didn't even, it had its own radio service. There was no television there until, I think, the 90s. Before, I mean, people had videos. People would get videos sent to them, VCRs and things like that, and DVDs, which they would then play. And these would include like news clips and things like this. This is literally the only TV they had. They had their own radio service, South Atlantic Media, which is now shut down. And then with the development of the airport, the first internet connection turned up on St Helena, but it was actually a very poor one. Instantly, I don't think it's a coincidence that the development of the internet connection on St Helena and the airport were developed at the same time. It's almost like the two go together: communications linking and physical linking from that island to the rest of the world. I'm going to cross over this busy road now, so it might get a bit noisy for a few minutes. There we go. I'm on my lunch break. Normally, it's quite good. I've got another job to go to. See, normally I'm still on lockdown hours at the moment. So, I mean, my average working day is 3 hours. I've got an extra job to do today, so that's good. So I've got a little bit of a break. I'm going to walk there now. It's about an hour's walk. Oh, forget that. And then I'm going to go back there. Yeah, it's been a bit. Can you see me properly? It's the light. Yeah, it's been a bit of a nightmare, the lockdown for me. I mean, I'm self-employed, so it's up to the people I work for to set their own hours. But a lot of them are on lockdown, things like that too. So they've got less money. They've got time to do things I normally do, such as the cleaning and things like that. So they do that to pass the time, which means my hours go down, but I have an extra job. It's about a half hour's walk from here, but I'm going to use the time. Normally I would take a break now anyway. I'm going to use the time to go there and make this little video, do a bit of shopping as well. So yeah, the St Helena's internet connection consisted of basically satellite. It was satellite only. The satellite it was a 25-foot dish antenna, just a single one, and the connection was the equivalent. I mean, this was only, like I said, set up around about 2011, I think. Its speed though was basically dial-up stars. It was about the equivalent of dial-up. Its connection speed, and let's remember that that single antenna serves, and the link for the satellite has to carry the traffic of every internet user on the island. And I don't know how many of that. There's 4,500 people on the island. I don't know how many of them actually use that net. It's an interesting this communication thing as well, which I think has led to these problems because, or it's sort of dumped the problems on the people, along with the airport. I mean, one thing that struck me when I started studying the media of St Helena, and there's a newspaper, there's some, like I said, radio show, things like that, is the lack of foreign news, the lack of overseas news. It's St Helena is very insular, literally and figuratively, because it is an island. It's a small island. It's about 10 miles across. The closest land is 1,200 miles away. It's the coast of southern Africa, Angola, Namibian border. It's easy if you're on that island to look out at the sea surrounding you and imagine that the rest of the world doesn't exist. It's very. I can imagine it's easy to do that, but they can't. Unfortunately, that can't be done anymore. The rest of the world is crashing in on the island like a tidal wave, and I'm worried that the place and the people are going to be swamped. They're going to be inundated. They're going to drown mentally and culturally and psychologically. But anyway, this is an example of the kind of thing that you write. If you want to get an internet connection on St Helena's, this is a very poor connection. It's very expensive. You can get 750 megabytes at 1 Mbps. That's your package, £14 a month. The highest you can get is 21 gigabytes at 2 Mbps, £164 per month. St Helena uses the pound sterling like we do, or like a comparative currency. The average income on St Helena is just £5,500 a year. So you can imagine it sort of prices the whole thing out the market. You may afford the cheap package at best. Now the internet's the company that manages is the internet service provider for St Helena and other islands in the British Overseas Territories. Is called Sure South Atlantic, and it's currently being investigated by someone called Christian van der Ropp, who works for a charity called A Human Right, which is actually improving the communications grid. It's about the charity is geared towards improving communications, including internet service. There's a horse coming. Oh, yeah. Including internet service across the third world. And St Helena, of course, is one of these areas which is threatened in this sort of way, because it's what it is. There is actually a human rights campaigning to have a cable connected, because there is actually a cable being laid at the moment between Brazil and South Africa across this southern Atlantic Ocean. These massive transoceanic cables. This was the original form of communication before satellites, began in the 19th century with early telegraphs, and it's basically a massive cable that's just laid across the seabed. And of course the modern ones are fibre optic ones. They've kind of made a comeback because of the huge amount of data that is transmitted continuously around the world, and something, in a sense, satellites can't handle that completely. Oh, sweet horsey. There's lovely horses round here. And what Christian van der Ropp wants, he wants the St Helena to be connected to this cable. This would immediately give the island and the saints, the people who live there, full, unfettered access to the World Wide Web, much more cheaply than they're getting now with their shoddy, 750 megabyte 1 Mbps. And what the effect it would have would actually be very beneficial, I think, despite the disadvantages which I've talked about and will talk about again. It would means that it would help tourism, because tourists would be able to use it. The saints themselves could get involved in internet industry, gaming, finance, media, journalism, things like that, education, games design, all those sort of things the saints could do, which they can't do at the moment. So it does have that good side to it. It does have that good side to it. But the problem is with Sure, what they're doing, and this is an issue which will probably sound very strange to the saints, especially the older ones, from listening to what they have to say. But it's one that's all too familiar to people like you and me, non-saints, people who live in this globalist autocracy. And that is and that is this conflict between public welfare and corporate domination. People over profit, in other words. Sure is not supporting the cable. Sure doesn't want St Helena connected to the cable, and it's probably simply because Sure are probably making quite a tidy profit off the Saints' internet poverty. Because when you think about how much they charge, and they realise, I mean, in all the South Atlantic territories, St Helena has the majority of people. In terms of the territory it's a part of, it has like all but about 1,000 other people. Compare it to the population of the Falkland Islands and things like that. Most of the people in the South Atlantic territories live on St Helena, and they're the ones being charged a bloody fortune. They're being charged a fortune for their service, and I don't think Shaw want to lose that revenue stream. And if people have to suffer for it, well, Sodom. I think that's as far as that's their concern. And this is something that they're not used to. I mean, this is a kind of hazard, a conflict, a contradiction that people like you and me just take for granted because we're familiar with it, because it happens all the time. It's inbuilt part of the conflict economics of our society. But on St Helena, it was pretty much, as far as I know, it was pretty much unknown until very recently. So Shaw are challenging. They don't want St Helena connected to the cable because it would mean they don't get so much money. They have to charge the Saints less. The Saints get a better service, but Shaw doesn't make so much profit, and they may be fearing bankruptcy, a drop in revenue, things like that. And being a corporation and not a company, of course, they've got no real incentive to invest in terms of long-term profit, because if they're thinking long-term, if they're a forward-looking institution, they will know that it's sometimes good to sacrifice short-term profit in exchange for sort of long-term prospects, but they're not thinking about that because they're a corporation. They're thinking about the fast buck. That's the only thing they're considering. So they're opposing this cable. Christian van der Ropp and the Human Rights are opposing Shaw, and the St Helena government has just bloody renewed Shaw's licence. So they've just had their contract renewed. So the St Helena government is in the pockets, it seems to be in the pockets of this corporation. Again, this sounds all too familiar, doesn't it, for most people? It's sort of, I mean, the Saints have got to be protected. They're new to this, and they've done considerably well. I mean, they've done, getting Christian van der Ropp in shows that they are becoming streetwise very quickly. So there is a kind of steep learning curve which they are tackling quite well. So that is something we can be impressed with. But it shouldn't have to happen. The Saints must be protected. Their welfare is paramount here, and it means they do deserve a proper connection. For better or worse, as I said, there's disadvantages, but it has to be done. Oh dear, and if Shaw won't provide that, then they could. I mean, what I would do if I was the governor of St Helena, I'd say, well, sod off them. We'll bring in a company that can and will. We'll bring in a company that will. But that's not the only thing coming in at St Helena right now, I'll tell you. This is what I mean. This is the new dark age. I predicted this. Something like this would happen, and it has. Priti Patel, our illustrious Home Secretary, or not so illustrious, she has decided, she's come up with a plan to deal with the immigration problem, because we have experiencing mass immigration. Despite our independence from Kyrgyzstan, we're no longer on there. We don't have to obey their quotas anymore. There's still boats landing at Dover continuously at the moment. Very famously, small rubber dinghies are not seaworthy. They're not the sort of craft that are fit for crossing 20 miles of ocean. They're turning up loaded with people. These people are being put into posh hotels because there's no one else for them, and they're worried about the COVID pandemic, so they've been put into all the top hotels. You might have seen Nigel Farage and what he's been saying about that lately. It's just the government don't know what to do with it. They can't process these people. There's too many, and I mean, I think it's being done deliberately, and I've explained why in previous videos that it's actually something that's not accidental. It's being done purposefully. This is a nice spot, isn't it? Have a little walk around here. It's something that's being done deliberately, again, for strategic purposes of globalism and breaking down national identity and things like that, so we all get shoved into one homogeneous mess of individuals, atomised individuals, who then can be basically digested more easily by the New World Order. That's why it's been done. I mean, so it's obviously it's real. It's not just being allowed to happen. It is happening. Priti Patel is playing her role in this. But she's got this insane idea. I mean, there are detention centres being built to try and process the immigrants as quickly as they can. And by as quickly as I can, I mean it can take years. These people can literally be in detention for years, just lingering in what's essentially a prison. I mean, it's Campsfield House in Oxford, in Oxfordshire, near where I am. It's slightly north of the city of Oxford. I made a video there once. I got rid of it because it wasn't a very good video. But the noise you can hear is there's a scrapyard behind those trees. So what Priti Patel says is, I know what we can do. We'll build new detention centres and we'll put them on islands like St Helena and Ascension. It's like, oh my God. Ascension Island's got, there's one plan, she says Ascension Island and St Helena. Ascension Island has a population of 800, it has an RAF base, and St Helena of course has a population of 4,500 and has an airport. And this is the irony, right, because the actual territory is St Helena, Ascension and Tristan da Cunha. Tristan da Cunha has not even been considered. Tristan da Cunha is like St Helena plus. I've talked about it before. It's a considerably south of St Helena. It's even more remote. It's even smaller. It's even more isolated, and it doesn't have an airport. So it's not being considered because it doesn't have an airport. So Priti Patel is going to build a prison essentially on these islands for no other purpose than to house immigrants. Just put them somewhere when no one else wants them, a bit like Napoleons, or thousands and thousands of Napoleons shoved out of the way. And I mean, this must be insulting to the saints. I mean, because of course this is not the first time their island has been used as a dumping ground for people no one else wants. Napoleon Bonaparte lived the last years of his life there, and they're basically saying to them, look, we don't want these detention centres in our backyard, so I'll tell you, we'll give them to you in the little island, we'll give them to you in your little island, and you can put up with it. And of course there's a rationale to putting the prisons, or putting any kind of detention centre on an island, because on islands it makes escape more difficult. Because once you escape from the prison, further escape is hampered by the fact you're on an island. In fact, this is the rationale of creating prisons like Alcatraz and Parkhurst, because they're on islands. Funny enough, there was a massive breakout from Parkhurst a few years ago, and the prisoners were very quickly recaptured because they were stuck on the Isle of Wight. They had to hide out in a garden shed somewhere in the Isle of Wight, and eventually they were caught because they couldn't get off the island. But this is really, it's still insulting to the people, the natives of that island, the people who've lived there for generations. Well, St Helena doesn't have an indigenous population. It was uninhabited until, I think, the era of clipper ships, and then basically was settled by the British, and slaves as well from Africa were brought there, and the modern saints are the descendants of those people. Interestingly, yeah, St Helena was the first place in the world, just an aside, to outlaw slavery. It actually brought in the first anti-slavery laws. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, Sasha Johnson. It could be that, I mean, how big are these detention centres going to be? It could be that they'll outnumber the natives on Ascension Island, certainly, because there's only 800 people who live on Ascension. There's a transient community of the RAF personnel, things like that, but generally it's just a handful of people. What if there's a breakout? What if there's an escape, right? And you get massive numbers of prisoners on the island, free from the detention centre. What they're going to? That's terrifying. I mean, they could take hostages, because they do that sometimes. They could take some of the islanders hostages and say, you know, get us on a plane out of here, or these people die. And so this wouldn't be possible without the airport. If the airport hadn't been built on St Helena, it wouldn't have even been considered, because it wouldn't be practical, and it would just be Ascension only. This is what I mean by the dark side of St Helena Airport. And this is something the Saints, unfortunately, are learning to their cost. I'm still not going to comment on whether the airport generally is a good thing or a bad thing. But I am going to comment and say there's no way anyone can pretend the airport doesn't have its disadvantages, because it does. So that's the predicament they're in now. I hope that doesn't happen. I mean, as far as the immigration problem goes, mass immigration, which is plaguing this country at the moment, and much of Europe, North America, and much of the West. Well, firstly, of course, if it's being done deliberately, and the plan to do it deliberately has to be exposed. It has to be, the people behind it have to be exposed and basically prosecuted for whatever it is they're doing: treason, subversion, destruction of the country. And it is a destructive thing. This is not the direct fault of the immigrants themselves. They're not the people we're at war with. They're being used in this as much as anyone else. So what can be done? What can be done to heal that? Well, in the short term, obviously, something has to be done in terms of, like, basically the government has to put more effort into processing and repatriating the immigrants. Firstly, stopping them landing. Basically, I mean, the Royal Navy should be in the channel right now, just blockading the ports to prevent them entering, these boats from landing. They should be repatriated as soon as possible. Despite what you hear, these things are not difficult. It's easy to set up deals with various countries. It's easy enough to identify people and to repatriate them. And the only reason it's not happening is the government aren't putting that effort in, is because, like I said, they want it to happen for destructive reasons. The long-term solutions is something I have talked about before, which is, just one moment, just check I made some additional notes while I was out at work, which are on my phone. I've got some of it on a paper, but I've got some on my phone as well, so I'll just check those out. Oops. Right, because here we are. Yeah, that's it, okay. There's a long-term solution, which again, it gets rid of the pull factor. I mean, the push factor is being engineered in terms of this industrialised movement of people, which hasn't been seen since the end of World War II. But the pull factor is the fact that there are some areas of the world which are much nicer to live in others. There are some areas of the world that haven't been ravaged by war, where there's a higher standard of living, where there's a welfare state, things like that. Obviously, if that disparity is eased, the pull factor will go away. And that could be done. I mean, there's many ways to do that. I mean, you'll often say, well, it's not possible. Ben, it's not possible. It is possible. It's perfectly possible. With various political and economic reforms, you know, the cancellation of debts, things like that. That's a good start. The fact that the Western powers should stop funding oppressive regimes in the third world, stop paying money and getting involved in their wars and engineering their wars and things like that. Things like that would enormously ease the pull factor. And then that's even before we come on to the more esoteric, but also I think very real issues, and that is disclosure. And I'm talking about UFO disclosure. I'm talking about free energy. That, of course, for reasons I've explained, this is even a factor in the book I've written, would essentially eliminate poverty. And if you can do that, then the problem of immigration solves itself. Because nobody is going to come to England for the weather, are they? And you may think, oh, Ben, you're just a dreamer. You know, this is just pie in the sky, utopian nonsense. Well, actually, it's not. It's completely plausible, and I'll give you the reasons why. Here's the reasons why. No doubt someone will still call me a racist. Yeah, there's always a way in it. So my heart goes out to the people of St Helena and the predicament they're in at the moment, which I think can teach the world a lot about how this world works and what solutions could be found. That's like draw close to God outside a church. What can be done? What can we do, and what can anyone do to to solve this, to make the world a better place. And that, well, maybe I'll put a link in the description box, as per her Panwo TV tradition, to my free energy videos as well, because they're all on a portal now. My St Helena videos and free energy videos are all on a portal. Am I allowed to go to the street or not? This is private grounds, and it's like a public street here, I don't know. Anyway, I've got to get on to my next job. But, well, plenty more videos coming soon. I've got plenty of plans. Thank you for watching her Panwo TV. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order.